spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
But hopefully there we go. That's my beautiful voice. That's what everyone says. More Corinne talking. Is it? Can I hear that a little bit more, a little bit louder maybe? Hi, welcome to Without a Country. I am your host, Corinne Fisher. Happy almost Halloween, guys. I'm in orange. Wow. Oh, my favorite day of the year. Look, there's little slits, and you can see my bra, which I said, okay, it's black. This is very cute. It's Halloween themed. The veil between the living and the dead is very thin right now, guys. So take out a Ouija board. Make sure to close that portal, though. You don't want to be haunted for the rest of the year. Anyway, that's a different conversation for a different show. The first thing I want to talk about, right after Halloween, we are focusing 100% on Election Day. Hopefully you have registered to vote and updated all your voting information, because the deadline for that was October 26th. Maybe you early voted. Maybe you absentee ballot voted. If you did not do that yet, of course, please make it to the polls by Tuesday, November 5th. And that night, if you're in New York City, you can join me for a stand-up comedy show and live election results watch-along party at New York Comedy Club, Upper West Side. This is something that we did for the midterms. We did 4 years ago for the last presidential election. I do find the election much more enjoyable when I am with community, you know, that's not something I say a lot. I'm never a person who's like, you know what I need, you know what this needs, community. But I really do feel that for the election. So if you're in New York City, please, or if you're going to be visiting New York City, please join us. The stand-up show is going to be incredible. Mike Harrington, of course, is producing, and as is former Without a Country producer Alex Scarlato, his fiance, his baby mom, the woman who made him a girl dad. Okay, we're gonna be so excited. And on the stand-up show, it's me, it's Christina Hutchinson, Ryan Long, Danny Polish, Chuck Levfer, and AJ Giro, all joining us that night for some stand-up. And then we're going to do commentary until like 11 p.m. at night. Again, I don't think we're going to have a winner before we go to bed of the election. I do think it's too close, but it's going to be a really fun evening. And for those of you not in New York City, the live stream will be available on YouTube, but that is only going to be the election results watch along. The stand-up will not be live streamed because I don't do that to my friends. You got to go support them with their own live shows where they get the money, or watch their YouTube specials. All right, so that's first things first. And then the second thing is, if you haven't been following me on Instagram the past couple of days, I knew I had already done it last week, but I couldn't talk about it publicly yet. But on Monday, Christina Hutchinson and I had the privilege and honor of being a part of the Daily Show Presents Jordan Klepper Fingers the Pulse Rally Together, which is, Jordan Klepper, correspondent from the Daily Show, and also, fun fact, my former improv teacher from like 15 years ago at UCB. We reunited to be part of this Daily Show election special. And so, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, Christina and I flew to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and we attended a MAGA rally. And it was very much in the spirit of Without a Country. We went, and we were not combative. We just went to have conversations with people at this rally and try to figure out why they were still interested in voting for Donald Trump, and how they stood on the issues, and whether or not the fact that he has been accused at this point of 27 counts of sexual assault bothered them in any way, or his felonies, or the lies he's told. And it was really interesting. And it was, it was fun. I got to be honest, the Trump rally was fun. It was fun until we got to the part of the conversation where they said something completely wackadoo and out of left field. But I do have to report back and say that everyone was truly very kind, was open to conversation. and had a lot of the same, like wanted a lot of the same things. You know, the things that they want just looked different in their lives than the things that many liberals want, right? So it's like they want their families to be safe. They want their voices to be heard. That just looks different for many Republicans than it does for Democrats. And so it was an overall positive experience. I was disheartened by how many people just kind of acknowledge that Donald Trump is a sexual predator, a liar, and a felon, and they just didn't care, There was a part of me that was kind of like, cool, like, I'm impressed that you said that you know he did these things and you don't care. Because I was worried they were going to say, like, oh, the sexual assaults were fake news. And no one said that. Everyone said, like, no, we know he did these things and we actually don't care, right? Which presents a different problem. But at least to me, it said they're digesting the truth, okay? And to make people care, I mean, that's a different quest altogether, right? So that was that. So it did air on Comedy Central on Monday night. It's now available on the Paramount Plus app if you have that, or you can just head over to the Daily Show YouTube, and it is there. Also, I posted a clip that is a really interesting moment that I would like to go viral, obviously for my own vanity, but really I'd like it to go viral prior to the election because I think it's really telling, a really telling moment from the rally. And it was almost at 1 million this afternoon. And whoever posted it over at Comedy Central, and I am speaking as a former Comedy Central intern who used to schedule lower thirds on South Park, they spelled misogynistic wrong. And I noticed it right away, but the clip already had virality. So I was like, I'm not going to mention this because I don't want them to take it down because it had fucking heat. And at like 855,000, 3,000 views and 3,000 comments, I guess someone finally realized that they spelled misogynistic wrong over at Comedy Central and they took it down and they put it up again, but it's only like at 200K. And I am pissed. So please go to my Instagram and share that clip. Number one, because I think it has merit and deserves to be shared. And number two, just because I'm pissed. Come on. It had so much heat. It was such a good moment. Can we play that clip on the show, Michael? I have a lot of clips I want to share today. I'm a big TV star this week, and I'm going to talk about it nonstop this week, and then maybe I'll stop talking about it. I guess I have to stop talking about it after the election because it really won't matter anymore. But this was an interesting, good moment for me. So this is a clip. This is Christina and I and Jordan Klepper talking to a handful of women at the Latrobe, Pennsylvania Donald Trump rally.
Arts that Trump has made about women, grab them by the pussy, you could do whatever you want. Like, do those bother you? Do those affect you at all?
I don't bother me.
Just want to check.
Donald Trump was accused of numerous counts of sexual assault. Does that change how you feel about him?
It does not.
No.
I think if we look at the women President Trump has been married to, they're pretty glamorous and pretty gorgeous women. Mm-hmm. So the E. Jean Carroll case, I'm thinking that's probably did happen.
She wasn't hot enough to get raped?
I don't think she was a very attractive person, and I really don't believe the whole story.
That conversation we had that lady. What were your thoughts?
It was a bit of a roller coaster for me.
The sexual assault thing?
Yeah.
Like the going down the route of E. Jean Carroll's not attractive enough?
She's unattractive and doesn't get attention from men. And
Right.
so this was the only route that she could take.
Right.
As we all know, if you're, a 6, you have to accuse the president of raping you.
Yeah, be on camera.
Classic woman.
A classic. When
You
in
found
doubt,
us out.
Girl math, baby. Past
And that was just
Trump has
one
made-
moment from the show. But if you want to see the whole segment, it was a couple of guests that Jordan took along because he normally goes to these rallies alone, and he was just sick of going alone. And I'm so glad he called us, and I'm really so thankful for that opportunity. Really aligned with the kind of stuff that I want to be doing. So that was really exciting, and I couldn't be doing the stuff I want to be doing without my wonderful Patreons. Shout out to all the Patreons. A shout out to Dictator Hannah Pendergrass, my capitalist pigs. Carrie, Caroline Bonner, Erica Backus, Lisa Ashbacher, Barbara Mondragon, Delaney Muncie, Randy Peterson, Tegan, McKenna Hansen, Leah M. Ellers, Laura Lynn Pearson, Christopher Fanguy, Sarah, Nora Smark, Hale Stiers, EMCP333, Camilla Driggs, Jenny Lynn, Carolyn, Katie Robbins, Hannah Ronaldo, Jennifer Daly, Catherine Best, Tim Ackerman, Boo Batsy, Lakin Keen, Lil Floha, Jesse Paygrain, Audra Williams, Crystal Schmidt, Shelby Snyder, Michael Fow, Amber Christensen, Talene Georgian, Lila Lee Soley, Jasmine Grant, Bridget, Luke, Marisa James, Truggle, Brittany Gustus, Alex Hart, Sierra Matara, and my cuties, Karen Denise, Amir Hassan, Elisa McCall, Long Arms Length, Sophia Tauber, Gemma James, Miranda, Emily Eckelberger, Nicole Perks, Rebecca _99, Cavs 138, Zoe Ross, Annie Green, Heidi Lundquist, Nicole, Carl Murphy, Margarita Cranova, Brett Brunner, Lauren Moorkill, Chris Gordon, Tori Colster, Desiree Coutinho, Kristen Hood, Sammy Lane, Ms. Mack, Emily LaFontano, Joshua Callahan, and Fright Lab. New people joining every week. Every time I open my Without a Country podcast at gmail.com inbox, I see more subscribers, and that makes me so happy. I truly am floored by all the support you've been giving this show. If you want to become a Patreon yourself and get one exclusive news story every single week, you can log on to patreon.com/withoutacountry. I appreciate your support. It's going towards all the news subscriptions. It's going towards paying Mike, paying artists that make music and graphics for the show, for the beautiful poster for our election night show that Joe Frontel made. There's a lot of expenses because I have high standards for this show, and sometimes when I look at my American Express bill, I can really tell the high standards that I have, and my accountant can as well. So we're just trying not to lose money, right? And let me tell you, all your subscriptions have helped. Without a Country is making money on YouTube, which is amazing. It really is. I say,
Hail Satan.
That's what I say. Thank you so much for that. Let's move right into it. We have an action-packed week right now. First, let's get into the enemy of the state. This week's enemy of the state, I have it's dual enemy of the state, and it works because one is Republican and one is Democrat, and this is the fairest enemy of the state that I've ever had. So the enemy of the state goes to this week Tony Hinchcliffe, couldn't happen to a nicer guy,
of the state,
and the Washington Post. That's my dual
enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state this week. The Washington Post gets my enemy of the state because they said for the first time in decades that they are not endorsing a presidential candidate. I think they had previously endorsed Kamala and basically rescinded their endorsement, but I just think it's a really fucked up time and a fucked up year to decide all of a sudden that you're returning to your roots and not endorsing a presidential candidate, especially when you're a fucking left-leaning news source. Like, what are you talking about? And you know what? A lot of other people thought that was fucked up too, and lacked a backbone, you know? I am all into having conversations with people I disagree with, but you're a fucking left-leaning news source. Support the Democratic candidate. I think to say, like, I support everyone, or like, we're not choosing a side, I think that lacks backbone, and it's fucking pathetic. And a lot of other people thought that too. And so the Washington Post lost over 200,000 subscribers, which is about 8% of their subscription. I did not unsubscribe because I use it for this show. But, if you guys think I should, I will. I guess I'll just use a VPN to get through or however the fuck you access it without paying for the paywall. But I thought that was really, really fucked up and lacked a backbone and was just shitty and not the right year. Make that decision another year. And Tony Hinchcliffe, oh boy, listen. On this show, and long before this show, I have been an advocate of free speech. I don't even really believe like the phrase like hate speech. I don't even really believe it's not a specific a portion of speech. It's not like a real protected portion of speech, certainly. Like a hate crime is a thing, but hate speech is not separate from freedom of speech. It's like not a thing. And so that pisses me off. And I think comedians overall should be able to say whatever they want. That being said, we have had a conversation, I think that's gotten bigger in the past year on this show about comedians just basically prancing around, spouting out misogyny and racism and xenophobia or whatever. And it's thinly veiled as comedy, and most times pretty shitty comedy. And that's the problem with Tony Hinchcliffe. I wasn't offended by anything he said, quite honestly. I think it was mostly like cheap jokes that he told, but the problem is that he told them in a non-comedy setting, right? So it was not clear that he was telling jokes. And also, normally when you do a roast, the person or the people that you are roasting are present. That's number one rule of a roast. And number two rule of a roast is that we roast the ones we love. So there was just so many problems with it. On top of that, it was, I think, an irresponsible thing to do like a week and a half before one of the biggest presidential elections of our lifetime. And secondly, to say that he was only joking is just a fucking lie, because if you watch back the video of the MAGA rally, and I watched his entire speech performance, whatever the fuck it was at the MAGA rally, and I watched Trump's entire speech, and I watched a couple other pieces of the MAGA rally. Honestly, I was getting bored. But Tony Hinchcliffe, like, it is just a straight out lie to say that he was only joking, or that they were only jokes, because he accented, he punctuated the quote roast jokes with flat out endorsements of Donald J. Trump for president. And so you're not joking, unless you're going completely meta and you're saying that you were jokingly endorsing the president, which you fucking weren't, you little cuck bitch. Come out of the closet, Tony. That's why you're so angry, allegedly. So yeah, I'm just fucking pissed. And honestly, Tony, I don't know Tony very well. And any time that we've been together, he has been cordial to me. I did think he did a great job on the Tom Brady roast, but this was a fucking cuck-ass bitch move. And it all worked out because Donald Trump showed us and showed Tony exactly who he was, because Tony's roast, or whatever the fuck we're calling it, his speech at the rally did not go over well. And the Republicans and Donald Trump immediately threw him under the bus, tossed him. Just like, and then that's exactly what I knew would happen, because that's who Donald Trump is. He is a businessman first, so he'll take everything he can from you. And then as soon as you're making his brand of less value, he will kick you to the fucking curb. And can we please play this clip that was going around Reddit, Mike? And this is who Donald Trump is. And I'm sorry that Tony's career had to be affected. I don't think it is, honestly. I was looking at his Instagram followers, and they went down. It went down at first, and then it went up because people love racism. So he knocked it out of the park, But yeah. This is a clip of Donald Trump talking about Tony Hinchcliffe. He's completely ungrateful.
I have no idea who he is. Somebody said there was a comedian that joked about Puerto Rico or something, and I have no idea who he is. Never saw him, never heard of him, and don't want to hear of him. But I have no idea. They put a comedian in, which everybody does. You throw comedians in. You don't vet them and go crazy. It's nobody's fault. But somebody said some bad things.
And that's kind of the point that Christina and I were trying to make at the Trump rally. Like, it's not that we don't want Americans who feel differently from us to not be listened to and not get the things they need, not feel seen and heard in our country. That's certainly not what we want. We are just really convinced that Donald Trump is not the person who's going to do that, because if you are not of service to Donald Trump, he will kick you to the curb. And I think this Tony Hinchcliffe episode, whatever the fuck, was really showed that. It was a learning curve that he had to be a part of. And even my friends who are right leaning were like, yeah, this sucked. This wasn't the right move. He bombed. I mean, like, I know one person basically out of all the comedians who usually show up to defend free speech who defended him. Even Joe Rogan didn't really defend him. So sorry, that's who Donald Trump is. And you learn the fucking hard way. But yeah. All right, move on to a palate cleanse. This was a recommendation by Girl Dad Mike Harrington. This story is about Anna Kendrick, and it's from Variety.com. Anna Kendrick felt gross making money off of Woman of the Hour, which is the Netflix movie about the killer who appeared on the dating game show, the serial killer. Pretty good. I recommend watching it. And donated all her pay to anti-violence charities. She said she felt like it was the least she could do. Anna Kendrick revealed during an interview on the Crime Junkie AF podcast that she made no money from directing Woman of the Hour because she donated her pay to RAINN, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, and the National Center for Victims of Violent Crime. These organizations are two of the country's leading nonprofits that support survivors of sexual abuse and violence. This was never a money-making venture for me, Kendrick said. Eventually, Netflix bought the movie, but it wasn't until like the week before the movie's premiere at TIFF that I thought, oh, the movie's going to make money. I asked myself the question of, do you feel gross about this? And yes, I did. So I'm not making money off the movie, she continued. The money is going to, or has gone to, RAINN and the National Center for Victims of Violent Crime. That felt like the least I could do. We're so grateful to Anna Kendrick for her support of RAINN and all survivors and for being a compassionate storyteller when it comes to raising awareness of sexual violence, said Scott Berkowitz, founder and president for RAINN. Her donation will help us to continue to provide free 24/7 support through RAINN's National Sexual Assault Hotline. Kendrick made her feature directorial debut with Woman of the Hour, which tells the true story of serial killer Rodney Alcala, played by Daniel Zavato, and his 1978 appearance on the dating game in the midst of his killing spree, which is crazy. I was familiar with this long before Woman of the Hour. You can watch him on the dating game on YouTube. Alcala was sent to prison for committing 5 murders, although it's believed he was behind the killings of more than 120 people in total. The film includes several scenes in which Alcala preys on and murders young women. Kendrick stars in the film as the dating game contestant Cheryl Bradshaw. Given the film's subject matter, Kendrick felt gross making money off it and decided to donate her profits to anti-sexual assault organizations. Variety confirmed that Kendrick donated all the fees she earned as the film's director, star, and executive producer. In a statement to Variety, the National Center for Victims of Crime and its CEO, Renee Williams, said they were excited to learn about Anna's gift, both to our organization and our friends at RAINN, and humbled by her support. In a world where the true crime genre often sensationalizes tragedy, which is, I will say, the only part of Terrifier 3 that I liked, if you know, you know. Anna's work in Woman of the Hour stands out as a beacon of compassion and leadership. The organization continued, by advocating for a victim-centered approach, she is helping to reshape narratives that prioritize the dignity of those affected by crime. Her commitment to uplifting survivor stories reminds us that behind every statistic and true crime story is a human being with a powerful story to tell. Anna's support sends a strong message that we can engage with hard truths while honoring the experiences of victims and survivors. It's about creating a culture that listens, validates, and empowers those who have been through unimaginable pain. Kendrick previously told Variety that every moment of the movie is kind of a reflection of my own terror. I don't think it's an accident that I responded to this script at a time when I'd just been through something really devastating and traumatic, and that really changed my worldview, she said, referring to her own experiences with emotional abuse. Woman of the Hour is now streaming on Netflix. Watch Kendrick's full interview on the Crime Junkie AF podcast in the video below. So you can find that on Variety if you are interested and in the story notes. All right, moving forward with the episode, let's go to my Without a Country inbox. Again, if you want to contact me, it's withoutacountry@gmail.com. WACO Leanna sent me this piece on the pyramid of choice, which I found so interesting, and it's so relevant as we head towards Election Day. The pyramid of choice is a model that explains the various factors that influence our decisions. And she found it from capitalideasonline.com. It said, in a must-read book, Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me, the authors Carol Tavris and Elliot Aronson write on the chain reaction of behavior and subsequent self-justification. And 1 second, I'm going to sniffle real quick off the mic. Okay, that felt better. You know when you got to sniffle and you just got to get it up there. Okay, imagine Two young men who are identical in terms of attitudes, abilities, and psychological health. They are reasonably honest and have the same middling attitude towards, say, cheating. They think it is not a good thing to do, but there are worse crimes in the world. Now they are both in the midst of taking an exam that will determine whether they will get into graduate school. They each draw a blank on a crucial essay question. Failure looms, at which point each one gets an easy opportunity to cheat by reading another student's answers. The two young men struggle with the temptation. After a long moment of anguish, one yields and the other resists. Their decisions are a hair's breadth apart. It could have easily gone the other way for each of them. Each gains something important, but at a cost. One gives up integrity for a good grade. The other gives up a good grade to preserve his integrity. Now, the question is, how do they feel about cheating a week later? Each student has had ample time to justify the course of action he took. The one who yielded to temptation will decide that cheating is not so great a crime. He will say to himself, hey, everyone cheats, it's no big deal, and I really needed to do this for my future career. But the one who resisted the temptation will decide that cheating is far more immoral than he originally thought. In fact, people who cheat are disgraceful. In fact, people who cheat should be permanently expelled from school. We have to make an example of them. By the time the students are through with their increasingly intense levels of self-justification, two things have happened. One, they are now very far apart from one another. And two, they have internalized their beliefs and are convinced that they have always felt that way. It is as if they had started off at the top of a pyramid, a millimeter apart, but by the time they have finished justifying their individual actions, they have slid to the bottom and now stand at opposite corners of its base. The one who didn't cheat considers the other to be totally immoral, and the one who cheated thinks the other is hopelessly puritanical. This process illustrates how people who have been sorely tempted, battled temptation, and almost given into it, but resisted at the 11th hour, come to dislike, even despise, those who did not succeed in the same effort. It's the people who almost decide to live in glass houses who throw the first stones. And I'm going to go on, but this is very interesting, right? Because you can just obviously it's clear. I think, right? Yeah, no, I think here, and this is I don't want it to seem, like I think Democrats have more integrity than liberals. I actually don't believe that. But I certainly think liberals believe that they have more integrity than Republicans, and therein lies the problem, right? Again, this is kind of an aha moment I had while reading When Everything Falls Apart, which is, the Buddhist work that I talk about often, which I was reading to help heal my grief, but it also helped heal some of the hang-ups I had around politics. And I think in this explanation, hopelessly puritanical can easily be swapped in or out for, snowflake or woke, those kind of things, right? So the metaphor of the pyramid applies to most important decisions involving moral choices or life options. Instead of cheating on an exam, for example, now substitute deciding to begin a casual affair or not, sample an illegal drug or not, take steroids to improve your athletic ability or not, stay in a troubled marriage or not, name names to the House Un-American Activities Committee or not, lie to protect your employer and job or not, have children or not, pursue a demanding career or stay home with the kids. When the person at the top of the pyramid is uncertain, when there are benefits and costs of both choices, then he or she will feel a particular urgency to justify the choice made. But by the time the person is at the bottom of the pyramid, ambivalence will have morphed into certainty, and he or she will be miles away from anyone who took a different route. This process blurs the distinction that people like to draw between us good guys and those bad guys. Often, standing at the top of the pyramid, we are faced not with a black and white go, no-go decision, but with a gray choice whose consequences are shrouded. The first steps along the path are morally ambiguous, and the right decision is not always clear. We make an easy, apparently inconsequential decision, and then we justify it to reduce the ambiguity of the choice. This starts a process of entrapment action, justification, further action that increases our intensity and commitment and may end up taking us far from our original intentions or principles. It certainly worked that way for Jeb Stuart Magruder, Richard Nixon's special assistant, who was a key player in the plot to burglarize the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex, concealed the White House's involvement, and lied under oath to protect himself and others responsible. When Magruder was first hired, Nixon's advisor, Bob Haldeman, did not tell him that perjury, cheating, and breaking the law were part of the job description. If he had, Magruder almost certainly would have refused. How then did he end up as a central player in the Watergate scandal? It is easy in hindsight to say he should have known, or he should have drawn the line the first time they asked him to do something illegal, which is such an interesting concept because I think we've all been in a position where we yield our morals just a little bit. And then we go, well, I yielded them that much. I could yield them just a little bit more, and then just a little bit more, and then just a little bit more. And then all of a sudden we're in a position that we could have never fucking seen ourselves in, right? And that can be applied to many things. It's not just morality. It can be applied to the kind of treatment that you take in a fucking relationship, right? Your boyfriend yells at you once and you go, all right, maybe he's having a bad day. Then he fucking throws something and you go, all right, well, he's not hitting me. It's not that serious. And then he hits me and then you go, okay, well, I'll let it happen once, but then I'm not going to let it happen again, right? So it's just like we kind of like just change what we are willing to put up with, and all of a sudden we're so deep in something we look around and we go, how the fuck did I get here? In his autobiography, Magruder describes his first meeting with Bob Haldeman at San Clemente. Haldeman flattered and charmed him. Here, you're working for something more than just to make money for your company, Haldeman told him. You're working to solve the problems of the country and the world. I mean, which is what what both sides of politics are really selling, right? We talk about capitalism. Well, there's selling happening in politics. And a really interesting conversation that I had earlier this week, and I think it was with Jordan Klepper when he appeared on the bonus episode of Guys We Fucked we did this week. That is available to everyone. It was a bonus episode just to help with promoting the Trump rally special. But he really pointed out that there is a difference between politics and governing, right? So when people say they hate politics, like politics are the steps you need to take to then step into the role of being a governing official. Governing is the job. Governing is the thing that you do, the promise you make to the people. The politics, the politicking, that's you yucking it up, the networking and how you get there. And I thought that was really interesting, especially for people who say they hate politics, right? Because I think most of us hate politics, but we should all not enjoy, but we should all respect and think that governing is important. And I think the point that he was trying to make was Trump is very good at politics and very interested in politics, but he forgets that at the end of politics, he has to govern. And that's really something that he seemingly is disinterested in. All right, so Haldeman told him, you're working to solve the problems of the country and the world. Jeb, I sat with the president on the night the first astronauts stepped onto the moon. I'm part of history being made. At the end of a day of meetings, Haldeman and Magruder left the compound to go to the president's house. Haldeman was enraged that his golf cart was not right there awaiting him, and he gave his assistant a brutal chewing out, threatening to fire the guy if he couldn't do his job. Magruder couldn't believe what he was hearing, especially since it was a beautiful evening and a short walk to their destination. At first, Magruder thought Haldeman's tirade was rude and excessive, but before long, wanting the job as much as he did, Magruder was justifying Haldeman's behavior. In just a few hours at San Clemente, I had been struck by the sheer perfection of life there. After you have been spoiled like that for a while, something as minor as a missing golf cart can seem a major affront. And so, before dinner and even before having been offered a job, Magruder is hooked. It is a tiny first step, but he is on the road to Watergate. Once in the White House, he went along with all of the small ethical compromises that just about all politicians justify in the goal of serving their party. And this is certainly an internal battle I have every day of my life being a comedian. in comedy. Then, a female comedian in comedy especially. Then, when Magruder and others were working to reelect Nixon, G. Gordon Liddy entered the picture, hired by Attorney General John Mitchell to be Magruder's general counsel. Liddy was a wild card, a James Bond wannabe. His first plan to ensure Nixon's reelection was to spend $1 million to hire mugging squads that would rough up demonstrators, kidnap activists who might disrupt the Republican convention, sabotage the Democratic convention, use high-class prostitutes to entice and then blackmail leading Democrats, break into Democratic offices, and use electronic surveillance and wiretapping on their perceived enemies. Mitchell disapproved of the more extreme aspects of this plan. Besides, he said, it was too expensive. So Liddy returned with a proposal merely to break into the DNC offices at the Watergate complex and install wiretaps. This time, Mitchell approved, and everyone went along. How do they justify breaking the law? Well, if Liddy had come to us at the outset and said, I have a plan to burglarize and wiretap Larry O'Brien's office, we might have rejected the idea out of hand, wrote Magruder. Instead, he came to us with his elaborate call girl / kidnapping / mugging / sabotage / wiretapping scheme, and we began to tone it down. Always with a feeling that we should leave Liddy a little something. We felt we needed him, and we were reluctant to send him away with nothing. Finally, Magruder added, Liddy's plan was approved because of the paranoid climate in the White House. Decisions that now seem insane seemed at the time to be rational. We were past the point of halfway measures or gentlemanly tactics. When Magruder first entered the White House, he was a decent man, but one small step at a time, he went along with dishonest actions, justifying each one as he did. He was entrapped in pretty much the same way as were the 3,000 people who took part in the famous experiment created by social psychologist Stanley Milgram. In Milgram's original version, 2/3 of the participants administered what they thought were life-threatening levels of electric shock to another person, simply because the experimenter kept saying, the experiment requires that you continue. This experiment is almost always described as a study of obedience to authority. Indeed, it is, but it is more than that. It is also a demonstration of long-term results of self-justification. Imagine that a distinguished-looking man in a white lab coat walks up to you and offers you $20 to participate in a scientific experiment. He says, I want you to inflict 500 volts of incredibly painful shock to another person to help us understand the role of punishment in learning. Heads up, this was written in 2008, this piece. So, inflation, maybe he offers you 150. Chances are you would refuse. The money isn't worth it to harm another person, even for science. Of course, a few people would do it for $20 and some would not do it for $20,000, but most would tell the scientist where he could stick his money. Now, suppose the scientist lures you along more gradually. Suppose he offers you $20 to administer a minuscule amount of shock, say 10 volts, to a fellow in the adjoining room to see if this zap will improve the man's ability to learn. The experimenter even tries the 10 volts on you, and you can barely feel it. So you agree. It's harmless, and the study seems pretty interesting. Besides, you've always wanted to know whether spanking your kids will get them to shape up. You go along for the moment, and now the experimenter tells you that if the learner gets the wrong answer, you must move to the next toggle switch, which delivers a shock of 20 volts. Again, it's small and a harmless jolt. Because you just gave the learner 10, you see no reason why you shouldn't give him 20. And because you just gave him 20, you say to yourself, 30 isn't much more than 20, so I'll go to 30. He makes another mistake, and the scientist says, please administer the next level, 40 volts. Where do you draw the line? When do you decide enough is enough? Will you keep going to 450 volts or even beyond that to a switch marked XXX danger? When people are asked in advance how far they imagine they would go, almost no one says they would go to 450. But when they are actually in the situation, 2/3 of them go all the way to the maximum level they believe is dangerous. They do this by justifying each step as they went along. This small shock doesn't hurt. 20 isn't much worse than 10. If I've given 20, why not 30? As they justified each step, they committed themselves further. By the time people were administering what they believed were strong shocks, most found it difficult to justify a sudden decision to quit. Participants who resisted early in the study, questioning the very validity of the procedure, were less likely to become entrapped by it and more likely to walk out. The Milgram experiment shows us how ordinary people can end up doing immoral and harmful things through a chain reaction of behavior and subsequent self-justification. When we, as observers, look at them in puzzlement or dismay, we fail to realize that we are often looking at the end of a long, slow process down that pyramid, right? And I think we can look at either side of the political, world that way, right? How did we get here? Well, as they just said, in really small steps. At his sentencing, Magruder said to Judge John Sirica, "I know what I have done, and Your Honor knows what I have done. Somewhere between my ambition and my ideals, I lost my ethical compass." How do you get an honest man to lose his ethical compass? You get him to take one step at a time, and self-justification will do the rest. So thank you so much to WACO, Liana, I'm sorry, I don't have Liana, maybe I'm guessing, for sending that over to the WACO inbox. I thought that was really interesting. And there's a couple of topics I love talking about: morality, fame, come on, the truth, Shelley Miscavige. These are all things I love talking about. And she also wrote in the email, "P.S. I voted for the first time on Sunday, in no small part due to you and your show. So thanks." And I gotta say, I got a little choked up. That's great. I love that. And she didn't say who she voted for, and I'm just so happy that this show and getting together every week had a little bit of an impact on your life, and that you did something you never did for the first time this year. That's really, really cool. Let's move on to WACO Bridget, who also emailed me with this. This I think could be Corinne Fisher's party topic of the week this week. Whew, this is from LBC, which is Leading Britain's Conversation. This was not a story that was picked up by many people, but it does have to do what? It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to, cry if I want to. You would cry too if it happened to you. Do, 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 do. All right. We can't play that song again as a reminder. That's why I have to sing it, because we need to continue to be able to monetize these episodes, because mommy needs to pay for things. So anyway, this is from WACO Bridget, who sent this along just because we had been talking so many episodes about this suicide pod. And this says she's still alive. First SARCO suicide pod user found with strangulation marks as boss remains in custody. Well, we knew there were going to be some hiccups, okay? The first person to use the controversial suicide pod, dubbed the Tesla of euthanasia, was found inside with strangulation marks on her neck. The president of SARCO's operator, The Last Resort, Dr. Florian Willett, remains in custody after being arrested along with several other people nearby. Willett was the only person present when the woman died. The inventor of the SARCO, Philip Nitschke, followed the process by video call, but was unable to catch all of it due to technical difficulties. Okay, first of all, can you imagine you're in the suicide pod? Yeah, you literally already want to kill yourself. You're already at the end. You're already in the pod. And then the guy who's running the pod that's going to let you exit this cruel, cruel world is basically on a Zoom call getting instructions on how to kill you. Whoa. A 64-year-old American mother of two, who has not been named, died inside the capsule in the middle of a forest near a cabin in Maryhausen, Switzerland on September 23rd. The pod, which prior to this had never been used, allows a person inside the device to push a button that injects nitrogen gas into the sealed chamber. The person inside is then supposed to fall asleep before dying by suffocation. Willett remains in police custody in Switzerland nearly 5 weeks after the incident. He was the only person present when the woman died, describing her death as peaceful, fast, and dignified. The Swiss chief prosecutor of the case, Peter Stitcher, thinks the death might have gone quite differently, raising suspicions that the woman may have been strangled in a case of intentional homicide, reports the Dutch newspaper De Volkskrant. The newspaper reports that the pod is opened and closed several times before the woman presses the button, which triggers the procedure to test its closure. A forensic doctor present at the scene told the court that the woman had, among other things, severe injuries to her neck. It's also, reading this article, it's fucking crazy that if you choose to use the suicide pod, it's just you and one other person. Come on, there has to be a witness. This is a two-party procedure. That's crazy. I mean, it's crazy because if something goes wrong, the living person could be subject to prosecution, obviously. And then it's also crazy because the person can just fucking kill you. And like, you know, maybe you decide last minute that you've changed your mind, right? And he goes, nope, I was scheduled for suicide and we're doing suicide. It's crazy on so many levels. According to the news outlet, the company president, who was standing beside the woman throughout the event, was heard to tell the pod's designer over a video call, quote, "She's still alive, Philip," right? And it's also crazy that the guy who owns the company, or the president of the company, is the one administering the suicides. That's also crazy because, you know, similar to Trump, this guy is a businessman. So at the end of the day, he wants to make sure that his product works well and has good press. He doesn't care about this lady. In his head, he's probably thinking, well, she wanted to die anyway. Does it really matter how she dies? I'm not going to be liable. So wild. The comments came 6.5 minutes after the user pressed the button to end her own life. The president is said to have been confused by the sound of an alarm, thought to be a heart rate monitor. The court heard how he continued to lean over the SARCO pod to peer inside before the alarm ceases. Like, there should also be an EMT on site in case something like this happens. Jesus Christ, we do, we do the death penalty cleaner than this in the USA, and we're sloppy as fuck with the death penalty. The woman decided to take her life using the SARCO because of a long-standing disease. The company said she had been diagnosed with skull-base osteomyelitis, an infection of the bone marrow. She said she had wished to die for at least 2 years after suffering from the very serious illness that involves severe pain. Due to an immune disorder, the woman was unable to receive effective treatment for her osteomyelitis, the last resort disclosed. After being notified of her death by the 2 lawyers involved in the project and present at the scene, the police swept the forest and arrested everyone near the SARCO, including a photographer for Volkskrant. There's a death photographer? Like, what is happening here? In September, Chief Prosecutor Stitcher told Swiss newspaper Blick, "We warned them in writing. We said that if they came to Schaffhausen and used SARCO, they would face criminal consequences. Everyone arrested has since been released except for Willett. Volkskrant has questioned why Stitcher has not publicly accused Willett of intentional homicide, but has been using the suspicion to get judges to extend Willett's custody. A criminal investigation into the pod is underway, and all of the 371 active applications have been suspended for use. Those feeling distressed or suicidal can call Samaritans for help on 116-123 or email. Well, I don't think you should email if you're suicidal, to be honest. Okay, that's in Britain, though. The suicide hotline in America, I should know from the Wrap, I think, but it's 988 is the 24-hour suicide and crisis lifeline in the U.S. And you can call or text that number, right? I can understand wanting to text, especially for young people, if you're feeling suicidal, but like the emailing someone I think that's kind of a wild option. You know, if you're feeling suicidal in that moment, maybe do something that we're going to get a faster response. So thank you, Bridget, for sending that. You know, I love talking about the suicide pod. What are you shaking your head about, Michael?
Chris and I are just having some fun in here talking about the suicide pod. It's one of our favorite topics as well. Right. I mean, it is, good. Are either of you surprised that the first use of the suicide pod went haywire?
No, I can't believe they. Of course, they also couldn't do that, right, Corinne?
Who's they? Liberals?
I know those, the melitises.
What?
Mellitus.
All right, that's Chris Fega, everybody. High Society Radio. All right, so let's move on to a little bit more election-themed articles. As you know, this is again the last week before the American presidential election 2024. This is something that my mother does a lot of. I don't think you guys know. Di-Fi does a lot of field research and sends a lot of really good stuff for the podcast. So we should thank her. But this is a Schoolhouse Rock style cartoon and song that explains Trump's Project 2025. And I want to play this because I think it really does summarize like the 800 pages document that we've talked about a lot. And this is another thing that I've said: do not lose track of this. Do not lose sight of this, and don't let Trump's faux distancing from it trick you. This man is involved in Project 2025, no matter what he says. Can we play this? Will we get dinged? Do you think? Are we okay for this? You're on the fence. Okay. All right. Well, let's see, because I think it is pretty good.
Are some of your MAGA relatives still not understanding Project 2025?
We didn't need this intro.
Like they're 5.
We didn't need this intro.
You mean the Hey there, who are you? Oh, just the most important document in our country's history. You mean the Constitution? Nope. The Declaration of Independence? Yes, again. The Federalist Papers? The Federalist... What? No. Even more important than whatever you just said. Now sit right here and I'll tell you all about me. I'm just a little paper for the ages. A way to set the government straight. A short 887 pages on how to make America great again by forcing through the president's agenda, removing all of those who disagree, replacing with our loyal party members, and reclaim our great country. In sum, give power to the president to authorize the government to legislate morality and wrestle back normality from Marxist ideologies that infiltrate our policies like gender, race, or anything woke. We're gonna abolish the Department of Education, turn the swearing in into a coronation. America's great salvation will arrive with Project 2025. Coronation? You mean like a king?
No, it's called the unitary executive theory. Gives the next president unchecked power to do whatever they want.
So, a king?
Oh, let's not get hung up on semantics. Here's how it's gonna work. Once that we've started the transition, and no one's left to tell us to wait, we'll go through every policy position, get rid of all the language that we hate, like civil rights, diversity, and unions, and pronouns to mention but a few. Defunding any liberal institutions that dare question what we do.
I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court...
Oh, the Supreme Court. That's a good one. Now, where was I? Abortion will be pretty much illegal, and reproductive rights will be gone. We'll get back to the biblical ideal that a family means a daddy and a mom with kids. Repeal the crazy climate regulations that get in the economy's way, with everyone reporting to their stations on Inauguration Day. When we give power to the president to authorize the government to legislate morality, expelling abnormality like godless ideologies, protecting inequalities like gender, race, and anything woke. We're gonna abolish the Department of Education, convert the melting pot into a Christian nation. The stage is set, and we'll be going live in 2025.
I can't seriously say all that.
Wanna bet? Come on, let's crack me open.
Page 124.
Make more nuclear weapons.
Page 257.
End the war on fossil fuels.
Page 214.
No more gun violence protection.
Page 298.
Or feeding hungry kids at our schools.
Turn to page 5.
Ban offensive books from the classroom.
563.
Make it hard to register to vote.
Page 449.
Dismantle Medicare.
534.
Kill off the grizzly bear. Delete the term sexual orientation, gender equality, awareness of sensitivity, diversity, equity, inclusion, abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights out of every rule, regulation, contract, grant, and piece of federal legislation that exists. And that's an actual quote. And that, my friend, is only the beginning of how this makes America great.
You'll be so overwhelmed with all the winning that you won't know what you've lost till it's too...
Wait! This doesn't sound great at all.
No?
No, it sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Well, I guess if you wanted to, there's still some things you can do to stop it.
Like what?
Well, if you vote to save democracy and stand against autocracy and tell your friends and family, enough with this insanity. We fought too long to part with these essential civil liberties like privacy and equity and bodily autonomy and what defines a family, equality and empathy. And we're not going back, and maybe we can stop this radical abomination. The future all depends on your participation. That's the way democracy will thrive. America was made for you and me, so let's defend our freedom and our dignity. Now raise your voice and let's keep hope alive in 2025.
So yeah, I do love that. I love Schoolhouse Rock. I sing, especially their grammar songs and their like history, social studies songs. I sing them all the time to myself to remember very simple things. And also just the approach of making things entertaining that seem just too heavy. Like, yeah, no one's going to sit down and read the 800 plus pages in Project 2025. And they know that. And that's why they slip whatever the fuck they want to slip into it. I have a joke about how like last year, Gen Z on TikTok started circulating Osama bin Laden's letter to America. And part of why they started doing that was because they didn't read there's no way they read the whole thing, because if I sat and I read the whole thing, right? It's only 4 pages, handwritten, as the joke goes, classic OBL. And so there is a lot of commentary about the evils of capitalism that I could see agreeing with, right? In the letter, but the letter basically goes on to say in no uncertain terms, kill all the Jews. Like, you didn't read the whole fucking letter. It's talking about like eradicating the Jewish race. Like, hello, what are we talking about here? You have to read the whole thing of whatever it is you're standing, and that includes, I mean, certainly a conversation we've had regarding the Bible, right? Many times people have said, have you read the whole fucking thing? And they go, no, but I live by it. Okay, that's weird. Read the whole thing. If you're going to make something the moral compass and the template for which you live, the foundation for everything that you do, you gotta read the whole thing. One of the most interesting parts of Project 2025, I think, is this unitary executive theory. And I pulled it up on Wikipedia. It's very lengthy, but in summary, in American law, the unitary executive theory is a constitutional law theory according to which the President of the United States has sole authority over the executive branch. No checks and balances. It is an expansive interpretation of presidential power that aims to centralize greater control over the government in the White House. The theory often comes up in jurisprudential disagreements about the president's ability to remove employees within the executive branch. That's alarming. Transparency and access to information, super alarming. Discretion over the implementation of new laws. Freeze your eggs now if you want to. For those of you listening at home, for the part where they're talking about reproductive rights, that's not just abortion. There's also in the video chains going over an IVF clinic, okay? So I'm dead serious. If you think that you might want to freeze your eggs, do it sooner rather than later, because I don't know that IVF will always be around, especially if you live in a red state, right? And the ability to influence agencies' rulemaking. There is disagreement about the doctrine's strength and scope, but with more expansive versions of the theory becoming the focus of modern political debate. These expansive versions are controversial for both constitutional and practical reasons. Since the Reagan administration, the Supreme Court has embraced a stronger unitary executive, which has been championed primarily by its conservative justices, the Federalist Society, and the Heritage Foundation. So, as we've talked about before, and this is true of any president, if term 2, you always go fucking harder, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter. You can do whatever. Term 2, you go harder. You do what you want to do. And again, don't you think it's a bit sus that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, is jumping for joy at the thought of Donald Trump becoming president? Methinks there might be something in it for him. Methinks they just have a plan to make themselves powerful and get themselves a bunch of money. Okay, guys? I mean, what's going on here? If you think that he's going to help you, I feel bad because you were lied to. All right, moving on to this week's Could Be Worse. As I said, there was a lot of international news, so I have 2 stories for Could Be Worse. Again, Could Be Worse is our international news stories category for all you people who think that that being liberal means being like anti-patriotic, which I do not agree with. Even when this country pisses me off, there's no place else I would rather live, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Our first story takes us over to South Korea. This is from the Korea Herald. Court recognizes misogyny as motive for hate crime for first time. An appellate court ruled Tuesday that the assault on a female convenience store clerk by a man in Jinju, South Gyeongsang province, allegedly motivated by her short haircut, constituted a misogynistic hate crime. The landmark ruling is the first time a Korean court has explicitly recognized misogyny as a condemnable motive in a criminal case. The Changwon District Court upheld the lower court's decision to put the attacker behind bars for 3 years for aggravated assault, destruction of property, and obstruction of business. He was found guilty of attacking a female clerk and another man in his 50s who tried to intervene. Unlike the lower court's decision, the judges at the appellate court stated in the ruling that the misogynistic nature of the assault was a key factor. The attack took place at a convenience store in Haedaedong, Jinju in November 2023. The defendant suspected the clerk to be a, quote, feminist based on her short hair and reportedly said feminists should be beaten up. The female victim sustained serious injuries, including permanent impairment of her hearing, while the male victim also sustained heavy injuries and quit his job due to trauma. Okay, I was going to make a cheap joke and I'm not going to do it. The defendant's actions were rooted in baseless hatred and bias against women. The court said the defendant repeatedly declared feminists deserve to be hit while attacking the female clerk and questioned the intervening male victim by asking, "Why aren't you siding with a fellow man?" indicating a misogynistic motive. However, the appellate court also denied the prosecution's appeals to sentence him to 5 years in prison, saying that it failed to prove the accused was not in an unstable mental state at the time of the attack. Women's advocacy groups praised the court's decision to define the case as South Korea's first misogynistic hate crime, but expressed disappointment that the defendant's unstable mental state was considered a mitigating factor in the ruling. It raises questions about why mental health issues should reduce the punishment severity for such egregious acts, said Kang Kyung-min, the president of the Jinju Sexual Violence Counseling Center. Individuals have a responsibility to manage their mental and physical health. Why should an unstable mental state be a mitigating factor in sentencing? Which is an interesting point, but I mean, you can even, you can plead insanity for murder here in the U.S., so... But you got to really prove it, And then we head over to Afghanistan. Well, things have really been bubbling over there. Again, this article is from LBC, leading Britain's conversation, because although this story was widely circulating on the internet, there weren't actually a lot of outlets who wrote a full article about this, which I found upsetting because I thought this was one of the craziest stories of the week, right? So Afghan women have been having numerous bans instated, and this week, Afghan women were banned from hearing each other as Taliban's latest rule surpasses misogyny and silences women's voices. And again, I try to choose international stories that I feel like speak to the culture of the world, speak to what is happening in the world at large. And obviously the theme this week was misogyny. The Taliban has intensified its repressive policies, banning women from hearing each other's voices in public or private settings, alongside broader censorship of media and literature. This latest measure, announced by Afghanistan's Minister for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, which doesn't that sound really, really similar to things that we just talked about in that Project 2025 video with the president kind of having a larger say over morality. Isn't that interesting? Shouldn't we be alert to that? So this latest measure announced by Afghanistan's Minister for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, Khalid Hanafi, adds to an existing string of draconian rules aimed at controlling Afghan women. Again, never rest on your laurels here and think, oh, it could never happen here. It could never happen to us. It could never happen to Americans. It could never happen to the U.S. because anything is possible. And that is a phrase that can be made to be both positive and negative. Okay, so anything is possible. Can be glass half full. Anything is possible. Can be glass half empty. It comes just 2 months after the Taliban banned women's voices in public spaces. In a voice message, Hanafi declared that even during prayers, a woman's voice should not be audible to other women, raising concerns among activists that such laws could isolate women even further, preventing them from engaging in conversation or forming support networks. Again, it's like the whole Afghan government is setting up women to be perfect, prey for abuse, right? Because one of the first things you want to do if you want to abuse a singular person or a group of people is to isolate them, cut them off from their support network, in this case, other women who can advocate for them, who can advocate for each other. In his message, Minister Khalid Hanafi said, even when an adult female prays and another female passes by, she must not pray loudly enough for them to hear. How could they be allowed to sing if they aren't even permitted to hear each other's voices while praying, let alone for anything else? He said, these are new rules and will be gradually implemented, and God will be helping us in each step we take. Wow, cool. They want us not to exist at all, said one Afghan woman from Herat, reflecting the despair many feel under the Taliban's escalating restrictions. These restrictions have reportedly led to an increase in suicides among women under the unbearable strain of enforced isolation. Concurrently, the Taliban has issued a mandate forbidding the display of any images of living beings in the media. The Information Ministry in Helmand province announced that images of humans and animals are now prohibited in publications and broadcasts, adding to bans in other provinces, including Takhar and Kandahar. This extension of the Taliban's interpretation of Islamic law comes with the removal of an estimated 400 books allegedly aimed at destroying the thought, faith, unity, and culture of Afghanistan. The confiscated materials have been replaced with religious texts reflecting an increasingly severe clampdown on cultural expression. And what I'm thinking here, the first thing I think of when you say that, you forbid images of living beings in the media, you're eradicating any other leaders and any other, pillars of fame. Like, fame does not exist. And I actually don't think eradicating fame is a terrible idea, but certainly, but eradicating these things and then still having the Taliban rule and possibly rule facelessly, that's not good. You need to know who's leading your country. You need to know who's ruling you. That's extremely important. It shouldn't be the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. That's how you can just do whatever the fuck you want. A midwife in Herat told Amu TV that Taliban officials forbid female healthcare workers, the last of the Afghan women allowed to work outside their homes, from speaking, especially with male relatives. They don't even allow us to speak at checkpoints when we go to work. And in the clinics, we are told not to discuss medical matters with male relatives, the midwife, who has worked in remote healthcare clinics for 8 years, told the channel. This surpasses misogyny, said Nazifa Hakpal, a former Afghan diplomat. It exemplifies an extreme level of control and absurdity, she said. And here's a list. The Taliban has decreed that Afghan women are forbidden to, and this is the list of all the things that they are forbidden to do: go to high school or university, work in the civil service, attend a protest, go abroad, drive a car, travel alone, ride in a taxi, speak in public, speak loudly inside your house, sing, read the Quran aloud in public, speak to a male doctor, play sport, go to the gym, go to the park, wear bright clothes, wear high heels, look at men they don't know, show their faces in public, and own a smartphone. The mounting restrictions have led to divisions within the Taliban itself, with some officials expressing concern over the impact of extreme policies on public tolerance. A senior Taliban official warned of potential repercussions, fearing that should a viable alternative to the Taliban emerge, public dissent could turn violent. The current approach has bred an atmosphere of fear and isolation, with human rights advocates warning that Afghan women are effectively cut off from the outside world and each other. Again, this is a fucking national issue. I believe last week or a couple weeks ago, we talked about the Taliban being taken to international court. Let's see. Like as of September, it was said that they were being taken to international court over gender discrimination. Meryl Streep got involved, which I was happy to see. I don't know when this hearing is like supposed to be happening though, because in the meantime, they just keep taking rights away from women. And it's really crazy. And like the US, we love to put our nose in other people's business. And like now's the fucking time, right? To me, this is like, you know, this is steps away from turning into a Holocaust of Afghan women. And it's we cannot just stand by silently as this happens to the women of Afghanistan. It's appalling. All right, moving on to GUUURL. We will talk more about the election for the rest of the show. Again, this is GUUURL / the main story because, as I said a couple of weeks ago, for the next several weeks, the main story is, of course, the 2024 election. That's the main story. Voter turnout is the first topic. Again, I pulled something from The Tilt by Nate Cohn, who we covered 2 of his articles, I believe it was last week. This is his subscriber-only newsletter that I do have access to because I am a subscriber to the New York Times, so I thought I would share that to you. And there, for some reason, the New York Times articles do not load. I don't know why. How much bandwidth does the New York Times take up that it does this? Why? It does it at my house too, so it's not even just the internet here. Oh my gosh. Does it do that for you, Michael? The New York Times, I almost don't even want to pull articles anymore, which is such a shame because there's a lot of good pieces that they have, but they just do not load. And I can't access them on here. Okay. Let's see. You've pulled it up. Thank you. All right. So, again, from The Tilt by Nate Cohn. This time, it may actually come down to turnout. Democrats have gained among high turnout voters, while Donald Trump has made gains among groups that tend to show up only for presidential races or not at all. Every 4 years, the pundits say it all comes down to turnout. The line is such a cliche, it's never inaccurate, but also means nothing, that it's sometimes a joke on social media. This year, though, I'm not laughing. This time, the election really might come down to turnout. Usually, this is not my view. If anything, I have tended to think of turnout as a somewhat overrated factor in explaining election results. The makeup of the electorate is relatively predictable. The big question is usually whom those voters will support. In Pennsylvania in 2022, for instance, the same voters backed a Democrat for governor by 15 percentage points and another Democrat for Senate by 5 points, and backed Republicans in the U.S. House. This wide variation all came from the same turnout. But this election seems different. As we reported all cycle, Democrats excel among high turnout voters, while Donald J. Trump is strong among relatively low turnout voters. He's made his biggest gains among low turnout demographic groups like young men and non-white voters. This pattern has held all the way to the final stretch. In the most recent wave of New York Times Siena College polls of key battlegrounds, Kamala Harris led collectively among voters who turned out in recent primaries or the 2022 midterms, while Mr. Trump had a 12-point lead among the 2020 but not 2022 vote and a 19-point lead among those who didn't vote in 2020, but who were registered at the time. New registrants are evenly divided. This is an extraordinary change from as recently as a decade ago, when Democrats were presumed to be the party that benefited from high turnout. During the Obama era, Democratic chances seemed to depend on mobilizing young, non-white, and infrequent voters to the polls. Now all these familiar maxims have been turned upside down. As the prominent Democratic pollster Anna Greenberg put it, the Harris coalition rests on the most reliable voters, older, college-educated. Trump needs every single low-propensity, less educated young person to come out and vote for him. Ms. Harris can probably take it to the bank that primary or midterm voters will turn out in a presidential election. Those who didn't vote in 2022, let alone 2020, are a little more iffy. Tens of millions of them will undoubtedly vote, but just how many and exactly which ones can easily decide the election. In the extreme, the Times Siena data suggests Mr. Trump could win the presidency, perhaps even fairly handily, if he could turn out all registered voters. To take a striking example, Ms. Harris or President Biden has never led a Times Siena poll of registered voters in Michigan so far this cycle. If, on the other hand, Ms. Harris could replay the midterm electorate when more casual voters stayed home, she could easily win over 300 electoral votes and carry the swing states by a comfortable margin. The broader demographic story of the election may also hinge on turnout. As we first reported a year ago, Mr. Trump is faring surprisingly well among young, Black, and Hispanic voters, but almost all of that strength is contained among those who sat out the midterms. Hopefully Tony Hinchcliffe's comments on Puerto Rico being a floating pile of garbage, I think he said, maybe that will help Hispanic voters change their vote to Kamala Harris. This is not simply about education. Even the college graduates who sat out the midterms were far likelier to say they backed Mr. Trump. Of course, just because Mr. Trump leads among irregular voters does not necessarily mean he will win the irregular voters who decide to show up. In the midterms, Democrats managed to draw a disproportionately democratic group of voters out of the pool of voters who didn't vote in primaries. This time, it's possible they could draw a disproportionately Democratic group out of the Republican-leaning pool of those who didn't vote in the midterms. Imagine, for instance, that the infrequent Black or young voters who say they back Mr. Trump in the polls generally don't show up, while those who back Ms. Harris really do come to the polls. This does not strike me as especially far-fetched, and I wrote that sentence before a comedian at a Trump rally referred to Puerto Rico as an island of garbage and set off a torrent of social media criticism. The Times Siena polling suggests something like this is a real possibility. The poll asks voters how likely they are to vote, and Ms. Harris usually fares best among those who say they're almost certain to vote, while Mr. Trump fares better among those who aren't sure. This should not be especially surprising, as Ms. Harris fares best among higher turnout voters. What is more surprising is that this advantage penetrates even within different turnout groups. For instance, Mr. Trump leads by 7 points among 2022 non-voters who say they're almost certain or very likely to vote, while he leads by 14 points among those who are less likely. All of this information is incorporated into the Times Siena poll, which estimates the likelihood people will vote by blending their track record of voting with whether they say they will vote in the coming election. Historically, both measures have independent value in predicting turnout. In this election, they point the same way. As a result, Ms. Harris has usually fared better among likely voters than registered voters in Times Siena polling. We consistently find her ahead in Michigan, for instance, even as she consistently trails among registered voters. This basic approach has validated well after elections. The electorate in the Times Siena poll usually closely resembles the actual electorate based on the final turnout data available months after the election. In fact, this is probably the one thing that hasn't contributed to survey error in Times Siena polling in recent studies. Nonetheless, this record does not necessarily mean anyone should be confident in this exact view of the electorate. In the past, Times Siena polling hasn't found such a stark relationship between these turnout measures and vote choice. As a result, it has been far less sensitive to these kind of choices and the eventual turnout. This cycle, it's easy to see how this ends up going differently with big consequences for the outcome and our understanding of the election. These scenarios can even be mixed and matched. What if white working class people with no record of voting turn out for Mr. Trump while the dissenting and disaffected young and black voters stay home? In this scenario, many of the big demographic swings toward Mr. Trump that we've reported about this cycle might fade, but Mr. Trump could win nonetheless. There are countless and other possibilities. There's another reason not to be so confident in how low turnout voters will behave this cycle. They are also fairly likely to be undecided. Even during the last time Siena polls, they were far less likely to know whom they supported. As a consequence, they may have also been far less likely to know whether they would vote at all. As they decide, they may also decide to turn out or not. If these voters break one way or another as they tune in to the race, it's easy to imagine how either side wins comfortably. Again, so I know that's kind of like a lot of heavy polling, but it is such an American pastime the week before the election to be like, who do we think is going to win? Who do we think is going to win the election? And I got to be honest, the answer is that we just don't know. It is so, so, so close. Every vote matters. Now, Tony Hinchcliffe might have set the Republican Party back a few notches, but don't worry, the Republicans the Democrats shot themselves in the foot as well this week, and in association with the Tony Hinchcliffe comment, right? So, Biden was talking about it, and it was like a perfect thing to take advantage of, and somehow Biden fumbled the ball for the Democrats. And this is from Fox News. Biden's garbage comment sends Dem senators scrambling in key swing state races. Strongly disagrees. 5 incumbent senators, including a Senate candidate, told Fox News Digital they disagree with Biden's viral comment. So President Biden sparked a political firestorm yesterday after calling supporters of former President Trump garbage. And this mistake has made so many times, right? Like, don't call the other side in totality garbage or trash or disparage them. It's just not going to work out. There's no winning, right? Like, because the people who think that already and that it's going to like get on your side, they already think that. They don't need for you to say it out loud. Like, it's not helping anything. So, yes, he called supporters of former President Trump garbage, which could spell trouble for several incumbent Democratic senators running for re-election in key swing states where Trump is popular. Fox News Digital reached, because spite is such a motivator, right? So maybe what we just talked about with the Time Siena polls, like these people who are kind of like low turnout voters, right? That might just be the fire lit under their ass that they needed to go out and vote. Like maybe they were thinking about voting for Trump and then they hear that comment. They're like, well, if this guy thinks I'm garbage, then this whole party must think I'm garbage. So I'm going to vote for the party that doesn't think I'm garbage. And then, of course, Donald Trump's taking advantage of it. He's putting on a garbage vest, speaking at rallies, sitting in a fucking garbage truck like he's a child in a firehouse. Like, it's ridiculous. So Fox News Digital reached out to 5 Democratic senators, Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin, who we spoke about recently, Montana Senator John Tester. We also spoke about him recently. Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, also spoke about him. Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen, didn't speak about her. Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey and Arizona Senate candidate Ruben Gallego for comment on Biden's remarks. Tammy Baldwin does not agree with President Biden. Andrew Mamo, Tammy Baldwin's campaign spokesman, told Fox News Digital, Tammy is fighting for all Wisconsinites, no matter who they are or who they vote for. A Rosen spokesperson told Fox News Digital, Senator Rosen strongly disagrees with disparaging anyone based on who they vote for. As one of the most bipartisan and independent senators, she works hard to find common ground across party lines and represent all Nevadans. John Tester doesn't agree with those comments and is proud to have the support of Montanans of all political stripes, including those who are voting for Donald Trump, said Monica Robinson, spokesperson for Montanans for Tester. Sherrod doesn't agree with that and fights for all Ohioans, regardless of who they vote for. Brown campaign spokesperson Matt Keyes told Fox News Digital. I am running to represent all Arizonans, regardless of who they vote for, Gallego told Fox News Digital in a statement. Senator Casey respects all Pennsylvanians, regardless of who they vote for, Casey campaign spokesperson Maddie McDaniel told Fox News Digital. Democratic Representative Alyssa Slotkin, running for Senate in the swing state of Michigan, spoke in opposition of Biden's comments, too. He shouldn't have said it. It's inappropriate, Slotkin said during an appearance on local radio Wednesday morning. For me, I just think that kind of talk is the last thing we need in our politics. And honestly, I think, I hate to say this, but I think the best move for Biden right now is the Beyonce move. Don't do interviews. Just be a face, be around, be clapping, look handsome, say less, Biden. While all the because it's just like the reason why he lost the nomination was basically because of his rambling and a little bit of the falling. So why do they think that the talking is going to go well for him now, right? It's like I thought we already made that decision. While the Democrats, Fox News Digital reached out to the condemned Biden's garbage comment. Some have disparaged Trump supporters, including Gallego and Brown. Gallego previously called Trump supporters dumb and the worst people in the world. Brown accused Trump supporters of racism and said it works for them. During a virtual Kamala, spelled wrong, good job, Fox, Kamala Harris campaign call with Voto Latino, Biden took a swipe at former President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, which made headlines after insult comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made jokes mocking different ethnic groups. Man, he's getting a lot of press this week. In one joke, he referred to Puerto Rico as a, quote, floating island of garbage. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, Biden said. Trump's demonization of Latinos is unconscionable and it is un-American. His remarks were quickly likened exactly. It's basket of deplorables all over again. Exactly. His remarks were quickly likened to Hillary Clinton's labeling of half of Trump supporters as belonging in a basket of deplorables in 2016, a comment that was widely seen as undermining her campaign. The White House attempted to clean up Biden's remark. White House spokesperson Andrew Bates told Fox News' Jackie Heinrich President Biden referred to the hateful rhetoric at the Madison Square Garden rally as garbage. The president was referencing a joke by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe in which he likened Puerto Rico to an island of floating garbage in the middle of the ocean, he said. So just to clarify, he was not calling Trump supporters garbage, which is why he put this out and is why he wanted to make sure that we put out a statement that clarified what he meant and what he was trying to say. So again, whatever he meant to say or was trying to say, he said what he said. And so just want to make that very clear for folks who are watching. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters Wednesday. VP Kamala Harris distanced herself from Biden's remarks on Tuesday. I think that, first of all, he clarified his comments, but let me be clear. I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for, Harris said. All right. Michael, did you pin the number for people to call in the chat in case people want to? Is it there? I can't hear you.
Yes, it has been there from the start of the show.
Amazing.
But in case anybody is having a hard time seeing the pin message, the number is 201-308-3510. Please be ready to have me screen your calls via text message.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. We're now headed over to the FP.com, which is Barry Weiss's The Free Press for free people. What I kind of refer to as liberals gone rogue, although sometimes I swear the Free Press is more conservative than Fox News. It's interesting. My problem with the Free Press is they cover interesting stories and they aren't afraid to say things that other news outlets are afraid to say, but sometimes they definitely do try to be edgelords just for the sake of being edgelords. But anyway, so this is Donald Trump's revenge fantasies. The former president says he wants to punish his political rivals. Does he mean it? And again, I think that's also something that we have to be really wary of if there is a term two of Donald Trump. And so this is by Oliver Wiseman. Who would be the most important person in a second Trump administration other than the president? Given the global disorder, you might think the answer would be the Secretary of State, or given Trump's age, he would be the oldest person to be sworn in as president. Perhaps it would be his vice president, J.D. Vance. That's not how Vance sees it. He recently said that the most important person in government in a Trump-Vance administration other than the president is not the vice president. It would be the attorney general. Asked why, Vance explained, you need people to believe that if the attorney general prosecutes somebody, it's motivated by justice and law and not by politics. And here I'm going to say that old saying that usually apply to people in relationships, people tell you who they are. Thank you. Vance is right about the qualities of a good attorney general. If only his running mate saw it the same way. Because just as Democrats have weaponized the law against Trump, Trump is threatening that should he win, he will weaponize the law against his political opponents. These threats from Trump attack the core of what makes this country special. Losing an election should never mean the threat of vengeful prosecution, nor should it mean being chased by lawyers for years. And it's dark that this has become the norm. America needs a return to blind justice. To give a sense of what the current presidential frontrunner Donald Trump has said on the matter, a few examples. It's interesting, I think, that he refers to him in this article as the current presidential frontrunner because, again, it is as close can be. And I think for either side to say that their candidate is the frontrunner is stupid. Trump has promised to appoint a, quote, real special prosecutor to go after Joe Biden. And in an April interview with Time magazine, did not rule out firing attorneys who refuse to prosecute someone. It would depend on the situation, he said, of this hypothetical. When I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences so that this depravity of justice does not happen again, he wrote on social media last month, adding that he was referring to lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, and corrupt election officials. I would also like to point out that the correct way to say that would be when I win, those people who cheated will be prosecuted, but perhaps Trump didn't make a mistake and he doesn't think of you as human beings. Trump has shared posts on his Truth Social account with photos of his political adversaries, including Joe Biden, Bill Gates, Kamala Harris, Anthony Fauci, and Hunter Biden, among others, in orange jumpsuits with text that reads, how to actually fix the system, as well as other posts calling for the arrest of Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith. In July, he amplified posts on Truth Social that said Liz Cheney was guilty of treason and called for televised military tribunals for the former Congresswoman who was vice chair of the House Select. That's great. Televised military tribunals. I mean, this sounds like when the fucking like Taliban the Taliban is like lighting people on fire. Is that I mean, what is happening? Who is doing that? Or Al Qaeda? I don't know. Who's lighting people on fire? Everyone. The following month, he shared a post calling for a military tribunal for Barack Obama. Okay. Last month, he called for his presidential rival Kamala Harris to be impeached, prosecuted, or both for the crime of the century at the southern border. At a rally in Coachella this month, he trained his sights on Representative Adam Schiff, the Democratic nominee for the Senate in California, who fanned the flames of the Trump-Russia collusion narrative when he was the chairman and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. The worst people are the enemies from within, Trump told the crowd. The sleazebags like the guy that you're going to elect to the Senate, Shifty Adam Schiff, he's a sleazebag. Asked about his enemy within comments in a Fox News town hall, he stuck to his guns, this time referring to former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The Pelosis, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil. Asked again about the comments by Fox News host Howie Kurtz a few days later, he doubled down, referring to Schiff as a crooked politician politician and an enemy, and to Nancy Pelosi as an enemy from within. What began as a rally chant in 2016, lock her up, has over the past 8 years morphed into a broader threat of judiciary revenge. It's no wonder that many people believe that if Trump wins in November, his second term will be a revenge tour. Mention that fear to Trump supporters, and you will likely get the refrain about taking him seriously, but not literally. That's like the same interpretation that people use like for the Bible, or be pointed in the direction of Trump's first term as evidence there is nothing to worry about. The argument is best summarized by the Republican lawyer Mike Davis, who recently told Politico, he ran on, I'm going to lock her up, with Hillary and didn't do shit. But the tale of the Justice Department under Trump is hardly a story of an even-tempered president dutifully respecting the sanctity of the rule of law. In 2017, Trump fired Attorney General Jeff Sessions for recusing himself from the investigation into his campaign's alleged ties to Russia. And in 2020, Bill Barr resigned from the role after he refused to entertain Trump's stolen election nonsense. And believe me, the one thing I am certain of after attending the Trump rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, is that, these people were not combative to me and Christina or to Jordan Klepper. One thing is for sure, that if Trump loses the election this year, they will not accept those election results. That was the one thing that was extremely clear. They didn't beat around the bush. They told me this directly numerous times. Trump's response was to attack him as dumb, weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy, a rhino who couldn't do the job. This time around, Trump wants a loyal attorney general. People familiar with his thinking recently told the Wall Street Journal. I doubt that's because only a loyalist can be trusted to draw a bright line between politics and the law. Trump should know better, given his firsthand experience since leaving office of facing transparently political lawsuits. There was the meritless prosecution by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, not to mention the various investigations he faced while in office, including a politicized FBI investigation into his alleged collusion with Russia that hung over the first 2 years of his presidency. But Democrats at least know not to say the quiet part out loud. When Harris supporters chant "lock him up" at her rally, the vice president pushes back. Even Joe Biden realized he'd slipped up Tuesday when he said we've got to lock him up. He quickly corrected himself, politically lock him up. Maybe all Trump's threats are just another example of his penchant for exaggeration and bombast. Bill Barr, who we will remind you Trump has called, quote, dumb, weak, slow, moving, lethargic, gutless, and a lazy rhino who couldn't do the job, told the Free Press he's not too worried about these threats. While I've been critical of Trump and wanted someone else to get the nomination, I will vote for him because I think he will generally pursue much sounder policies than Harris, and because I believe the real threat to democracy comes from the progressive left. Can you imagine someone calling, this is like a girl, just voting a guy who said, you're a dumb slut. This is crazy. Based on my experience with Trump, I think the idea that he is a fascist and the second coming of Hitler is preposterous. Nor am I worried about him using the DOJ against his political enemies. I learned not to take his bombast literally, and even if he wanted to, there are sufficient checks and balances to detect and prevent it. Not if Project 2025 has anything to say about it, buddy. But surely we deserve better than "don't worry, he doesn't mean it." I take the old-fashioned view that words matter, especially those of a former and would-be future president. You don't need to think Trump is poised to become a fascist dictator to see these threats as part of the dangerous degradation of our politics. There's no shortage of apocalyptic warnings about either a Trump or Harris presidency. They are almost always overblown. The really alarming thing, though, is the cycle of norm violations, which my colleague Eli Lake spelled out recently. Both Trump and his opponents are trapped in such a cycle. Both parties justify their rule breaking as a response to the other side's escalations. The surest way to end our great experiment in self-governance is to treat politics as all-out war and our political opponents like an enemy within. Things are getting heated. All right, moving on to Congress, because obviously the presidency isn't the only thing at stake. We're voting for so many things, so many local government. A reminder right now to familiarize yourself, if you haven't already, with the questions, the props that will be asked on your ballot in your state before you head to the poll, so that you're not taken off guard. It's very important that you not just vote for the president, but that you vote yes or no to these questions, right? Please don't leave them blank. So this is by Carl Hulse from the New York Times. It's a news analysis. A unified Republican Congress would give Trump broad power for his agenda. A GOP House and Senate could advance Trump-backed legislation and nominees, but thin margins and the filibuster could pose roadblocks and cause Republicans political trouble. Former President Donald J. Trump has big policy plans should he be reelected, including mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. I believe it was in his MSG rally where he said, Michael, was it in his MSG rally where he just said, first hour, we're deporting everyone? Was that when he said that?
He said that
numerous times.
Yeah, I
okay.
mean, it's
big
gonna,
first hour.
It's the big first hour
it's
of
the
that
big first hour.
Of that one day he's going to allow himself to be a dictator.
Right, and which is crazy because again, no matter how you feel about immigration, whether we keep people who have immigrated here, without the proper documentation, whether we keep them, we keep them here and welcome them with open arms or half open arms, or we deport them, it costs the country money, right? And there's arguments to, mass deportation is extremely, extremely expensive and complex and will take a lot of planning. So the fact that he's saying first hour, we're going to do that, is a bit hyperbolic, to say the least. So former President Donald J. Trump has big policy plans should he be reelected, including mass deportation of undocumented immigrants and a supercharged crackdown against new migrants, tax breaks on tips and property taxes, expanded oil drilling on federal lands, and the elimination of the education department. That's good. A unified Republican government, the coveted trifecta of the Senate, House, and White House, would make those goals easier to reach and help neutralize Democrats who would no doubt try to stand in the way. And it would give Mr. Trump a free hand to install more conservative federal judges, including in the event of another vacancy on the already right-leaning Supreme Court, which has already granted him broad immunity from prosecution. It is a lineup Republicans are counting on. We are going to grow the Republican majority in the House. We are going to take back the Senate and send Donald Trump back to the White House, Speaker Mike Johnson assured the MAGA crowd on Sunday night at Mr. Trump's invective-filled Madison Square Garden rally in New York. That outcome is no sure thing, but it is a real possibility given the closeness of the battle for the House, the Republican edge in the fight for the Senate, and Mr. Trump's neck-and-neck race with Vice President Kamala Harris. It would open the door to a Republican push on legislation after 2 years of divided government has kept Congress focused on the basics of keeping federal agencies open and aid flowing to Ukraine. After his election in 2016, Mr. Trump also had unified control of government for 2 years, but his lack of experience, coupled with the resistance of some top Republicans, including Speaker Paul D. Ryan of Wisconsin and Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, limited his ability to get what he wanted out of Congress, particularly after an extended push to repeal the Affordable Care Act failed spectacularly. This time, Republicans would be much better prepared to take advantage of their consolidated power. Republicans on Capitol Hill are readying a push to renew the 2017 tax cuts, the most significant legislative achievement of the first Trump administration. Unlike other major legislation, a Democratic minority in the Senate could not thwart it with a filibuster, since Republicans would almost certainly use a special process known as budget reconciliation that requires only a simple majority to approve budget and tax changes. Mr. Trump has promised to not only extend, but also expand his tax cuts by tacking on a variety of popular new breaks, such as eliminating taxes on tips, making car loan interest deductible, and restoring a state and local property tax deduction sought by lawmakers representing states with high property values. Those ideas would add to the already enormous cost of the tax bill and make approval more difficult. But if there is a single issue that unites Republicans across the spectrum, it is cutting taxes, and they would be in a position to do so. Another major fiscal complication for the Trump administration would be the need to raise the federal debt limit by early 2025, when many Republicans have refused to back any debt ceiling increase. Democrats would be unlikely to provide much help without some significant concessions. Appearing this week in Pennsylvania, Mr. Johnson also promised massive reform to the Affordable Care Act, despite the multiple failures of the past and the political dangers involved. Healthcare reforms going to be a big part of the agenda, Mr. Johnson said in a campaign appearance captured on video by NBC News. He also vowed an aggressive 100-day agenda and said Republicans intended to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state. Republicans have also made clear that they want to expand domestic oil and gas production, including reopening the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling after it was banned there by the Biden administration. They see revenues from increased leasing and production as a way to offset the costs of the tax cuts and avoid being criticized for adding to an already soaring federal debt. And with the Senate majority, Mr. Trump could resume packing the federal judiciary with conservatives, offsetting the more than 200 judicial nominees named by President Biden. Republicans on Capitol Hill will also want to join Mr. Trump to push some of their culture war social issues, such as rolling back transgender rights, eliminating diversity initiatives in the military and other institutions, and clamping controls on the Justice Department and FBI. On some of the bigger issues, such as immigration, Republicans in Congress would be responsible for finding a way to pay for what is likely to be a very expensive effort to round up and deport millions of immigrants deemed to be in the United States unlawfully. As for the significant tariffs on foreign goods he says he intends to impose, Mr. Trump said that he would like for Congress to join him, but that he would exert executive authority to put the tariffs in place on his own if necessary. I don't need Congress, but they'll approve it, Mr. Trump said at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last month. I'll have the right to impose them myself if they don't. Sounds like someone who's planning on using that unitary law that we talked about earlier. On that front, Mr. Trump has indicated that if elected, he would be much more inclined to plunge ahead with his chief initiatives on his own if Congress resists, given the frustrations of his first term. Congressional Republicans are unlikely to put up much of a protest if he takes that approach. That may be one of the major advantages for Mr. Trump of a Republican Congress. If Democrats don't have a majority in either the House or Senate, they have limited power to fight back. Without committee chairmanships, they would not be able to convene congressional hearings, initiate investigations, pass legislations in an attempt to rein him in, or, as they did in 2019 and 2021, impeach him. Still, should Republicans gain full control of government, fulfilling some aspects of Mr. Trump's wish list could prove very difficult. The majorities won by either party are almost certain to be very narrow, providing little room for defections. It is the same dynamic that has handcuffed House Republicans the past 2 years. As a result, the most extreme ideas, such as ending the federal income tax or abolishing federal agencies wholesale, are unlikely to go very far. Others have tried in the past only to discover that all federal agencies have some constituency in both parties. Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and the few other more centrist Republicans will also have to be accommodated as much as the far right if legislation is to pass. At the same time, it would take only one or two Republican opponents to doom executive branch and judicial nominees if they are considered too extreme or unacceptable for other reasons. Though Republicans have shied away from defying the president on his personnel choices, a move that could provoke a fierce backlash from Mr. Trump. Ms. Collins is set to be the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee if Republicans win control, giving her significant influence on spending. Republicans would quickly confront the need to pass a dozen spending bills to fund the government. Many on the far right refuse to vote for spending bills without deep cuts or policy dictates that others in the party consider politically risky. Tight margins would make it hard for the GOP to pass those on their own. Those margins also mean that even in a Republican Senate, the majority would be well short of the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster, providing Democrats some leverage in shaping legislation. During his first term, Mr. Trump showed an early willingness to try to negotiate with Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi, then the House Speaker, and Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, who was minority leader. He had flattering things to say about Mr. Schumer at a recent political dinner in New York. If the filibuster proves a significant impediment, Mr. Trump is likely to demand that Senate Republicans move to jettison it as he occasionally did in his first term. Mr. McConnell resisted such demands, and the current frontrunners to replace him, Senators John Cornyn of Texas and John Thune of South Dakota, say they have no intention of eliminating the filibuster, but the pressure from the party's core hard right supporters to do so could become overwhelming. Damn. Crazy. All right. And we're going to end today on another article. Let's see how long. Rather lengthy, but I will say when we talked about the reasons at the Trump rally that people most wanted to vote for Donald Trump, it was two things. It was number one, immigration. That was the thing we heard the most. And number two, his fiscal policies, right? So immigration and money, right? And I will say there was absolutely no mention of anything like, DEI, nothing about other races who are here documented, other races in general who are American citizens, like racism in general in that way. Nothing about like transgender people at all. None of that was mentioned, or like homophobia. None of that was mentioned. Definitely a lot of pro-life, aka anti-choice talk as well. Mostly from women, oddly enough. All right, so this last article is also from the FP.com. This says, is there really a plot to use migrants to turn America blue? This is by Peter Savodnik. A top GOP talking point of this election is that Democrats are rigging the vote through illegal immigration. Is there any truth to it? Peter Savodnik investigates. Almost everyone in Lockland, Ohio agrees on this. In the past year and a half, 3,000 plus immigrants from Mauritania in West Africa have streamed into the 1.2 square mile town, taking over apartment buildings, straining police and fire services, and flooding the sewer system. They don't have furniture, so it's probably just 2 queen-size mattresses on the floor, Doug Weiheimer, Lockland's fire chief, told me. The newcomers, who have led to a doubling of Lockland's population of 3,500, are mostly living in a handful of 4-story apartment buildings with 10 to 15 people squeezed into a 4-person unit, Weiheimer said. The buildings have become cluttered with trash and filled with the fumes of kitchen fires caused by too much cooking grease, Mark Mason, Lockland's mayor, told me. If the Mauritanians ever leave, the mayor said, the buildings will have to be raised. I don't know how Lockland survives, Weiheimer added, but this is what people inside and outside of Lockland don't agree on. Who brought these newcomers here and why, and what it all portends for America? Is it simply another wave of immigration that will benefit from and strengthen our melting pot nation? Or is it, as some Republicans and Elon Musk, one of Donald Trump's chief backers, claim, a nefarious Democratic plot to bring illegal immigrants to swing states and even red states and eventually turn them blue? If you've heard, over the past few weeks, Musk and others suggest that a Kamala Harris victory means this will be the last election. This is what they are referring to. And this is very interesting to me because, again, and this is mostly based on my independent research that I do when I talk to Uber drivers who in New York City are almost always immigrants, but documented immigrants who came here legally. Those immigrants, usually no one is like more anti-immigrant, undocumented immigrants than those type of immigrants. So this is interesting to me. And also a lot of immigrants often vote Republican because of Republicans' stance on immigration, right? So while these immigrants are undocumented, now perhaps it is interesting to me that they think when they become, if and when they become documented, if and when they become American citizens and, get the right to vote, that they will be voting blue. That's like a bit of a stretch based on who and what I know. Not the idea, and statistics, not the idea that Democrats will cancel elections, which is what Democrats say Trump will do if he prevails. Again, he will cancel elections. Keep that in mind. Interesting. But that a demographic shift means Team Blue will always win every election. Lockland, after all, is one of many towns like Springfield, Ohio, Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and Aurora, Colorado, which we've heard a lot about, that have seen a huge influx of Mauritanians, Haitians, Venezuelans, Colombians, and others in recent years. To conservatives like Mike Howell of the Conservative Heritage Foundation, the only reason for this is a scheme to gerrymander the vote and usher in a Marxist revolution. Okie dokie. And I just want to remind everyone the definition of gerrymander, to manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. So we can think about gerrymandering as just like rigging something so that one party wins. I think that's a much easier way to think of it, right? That is the plan to have an openly international election. Howell, who monitors progressive immigration policy for the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., told me. Get a ton of people into the country and then also simultaneously aggressively fight against measures of election integrity to prevent them from voting. Doug Weiheimer, the fire chief in Lockland, Ohio, said he has no idea whether immigrants are being sent to Lockland to help reelect Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown and give Harris Ohio's 17 electoral college votes. But according to Donald Trump, the plan in Ohio and everywhere else new migrants now live is obvious. Our elections are bad, Trump declared in his September 10th debate with Kamala Harris in Philadelphia. Referring to Democrats, he said, and a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country. That quote is from someone who is neck and neck with Kamala Harris. Isn't that crazy? Okay. The former president added, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats, which we all know because it's now a TikTok sound. Earlier this month, while campaigning for Trump in Pennsylvania, Elon Musk declared that after 4 more years of the Harris puppet regime, they're actually going to legalize so many illegals in the swing states that there won't be swing states anymore. He noted that California Democrats who control the governorship and state legislature recently passed a law barring municipalities from requiring voter identification. If the Dems win, they'll ban voter ID nationwide, Musk said. That's why I think if Trump doesn't win, this is the last election. Musk did not mention that the GOP will likely hold on to the Senate in 2024, which would make it impossible for a future President Harris to pass sweeping legislation. Democrats have so far sidestepped Trump's and Musk's charges. When Fox News' Brett Baier asked Harris about the White House border policy in his interview with her on October 16th, Harris responded accurately that Republicans tanked a border security bill late last year after Trump came out against it. And this has been talked about a lot. This is one of Kamala's biggest and I think most important talking points, right? That the Republicans would rather win on the fact that they're going to take this down, and that's what they're going to do, like promises rather than policy, because they had the power to make this happen and they actively did not. Bayer did not mention any talk of Democrats manipulating border policy to win elections. Senator Sherrod Brown, despite the stiff re-election challenge he faces in Ohio, has struck a more conciliatory tone. Presidents of both parties have failed on the border, including the Biden administration, he said in a statement in May. Nonetheless, this fear that the White House has opened the floodgates to the unwashed masses illegally crossing the southern border. There have been roughly 8 million encounters with immigrants crossing the southern border since Biden took office versus 2.4 million under Trump, and steer them toward politically competitive states in order to transform the electoral chessboard has hardened into dogma among many Trump supporters. It has also provided them with a kind of license to protest any election result they don't like. Of course we win unless the election is rigged was a common refrain at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee in July. Viewed through this lens, one doesn't have to buy the conspiracy theory that Dominion's voting machines were rigged to ensure Joe Biden won the 2020 election. The rigging, as it were, is
that's a little misleading.
What?
I've been dead silent this episode, but the Republican basing what people were saying at the Republican National Convention is nuts, because that was directly following A, Trump getting shot in the ear, and B, Biden absolutely tanking the first debate. So I think that the general consensus by the RNC this year was, yeah, Trump's going to win this in a landslide, and the only way that we could lose this one is if, there is some serious issues with the Dominion voting machines, et cetera, et cetera.
But Michael, what I just tell you about me going to, a week and a half ago, I was at a Trump rally, and that was a huge talking point there. We asked almost every single person we interviewed if they would, number one, accept the results if Kamala Harris wins the 2024 election, and if they would feel, and almost everyone said that it would be January 6th all over again. They didn't even try to hide it. Every single person said that. That was the most alarming part of the whole goddamn thing. I was there. I don't know what to tell you.
No, I believe you. And I do think a lot of these people are in an echo chamber the same way people in the Northeast are in an echo chamber.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I was talking to, somebody the other day who he's like, I don't know a single person who's voting for Kamala. I'm like, yeah, because you called her... you know what I mean? Like you,
right? Of course, and that was another thing that people said at the Trump rally were being like, oh, Trump's definitely going to win. All my friends are voting for Trump, and it's like, yeah, that's how life works, and that's what I think is that's why I think. I enjoy doing this show is because I think most people have a friend group where most of their friends are voting for the same people. And I actually don't have my friend group, probably most people are voting for Kamala, but I certainly talk to and work with regularly many people who are voting for Trump and consider them, I am friendly with them. That maybe they're not in my text chains, but I'm friendly with them. I mean, God, most of the people in my group text are Canadian, so they're not voting for anyone.
Corinne, we're friends.
If we're being quite honest. Are you voting for? Are you saying on air that you're voting for Donald Trump?
I registered over the weekend, which I thought I was already a registered voter. I double checked because when you told me that voting.
Good. I'm glad. I mean, it is kind of crazy to be on air on this show and not be a registered voter, I will say. And also, you are so it's wild because I know you read a lot of politics, and this is not the only show on which you talk about politics. So that's even crazier that you don't participate in the elections.
Well, I mean, I was registered at one point, and I thought that would hold true, but when I checked, it did not. But I am. I got signed up. I got good to go. Listen, why would I sign up to vote? The only election I care about is county committeeman. At the end of the day, New York has gone blue every year I've been alive. So it's like, this is me signing up to vote should tell you I genuinely do think there's a greater than 0% chance Trump can flip this state red.
When's the last time that I don't think so, but
it was Reagan in 88.
Oh. Okay, so in my lifetime, I was a baby, but so I was gonna ask you privately who you were voting for, but good for you for saying it publicly. Are you gonna officially endorse Donald Trump on this podcast, Michael?
I'm coming out. No, I mean you told me I could do a Kill Tony minute on the
Oh, that's right.
The live show.
That's
so,
right.
yes.
Sorry, I should have included your photo on the on there. I forgot Mike's making his big debut.
Obviously, I should have. Yeah, I mean that's where I get my influence from. So if he's telling me to vote for Donald Trump, what choice do I have?
Oh God. Okay, cute. Let me continue with this article, and then I also wanted to quickly go over a piece of the guy who was like relighting the ballot boxes on fire. Okay, viewed through this lens, one doesn't have to buy the conspiracy theory that Dominion's voting machines were rigged to ensure Joe Biden won the 2020 election. The rigging, as it were, is happening organically at the border in plain sight. Earlier this month, a video surfaced showing how fears over a plot to steal the election are percolating in Lockland. Posted on the town's Facebook page by someone named Chicky, a man in a Trump t-shirt says of Democratic hopes for the Mauritanians. They don't want them to stay in the blue states. They want to get them into the red states to turn us blue. This isn't just a couple of cities, adds the narrator of the video produced by right-wing production outfit Real America's Voice. This is everywhere. No one making these claims that I spoke to, and I spoke to 5 leading voices from conservative think tanks, has produced any smoking guns. An email from the Harris campaign leaked audio or video and incriminating text. Nobody is sitting around in George Soros's mountain lair writing up the plan. Mark Krikorian, the executive director of the Right-Wing Center for Immigration Studies, told me. Krikorian doubts there's a conspiracy, but he says that's beside the point. More immigrants means more Democratic victories at the ballot box. I'm skeptical that there's an actual progressive plot, he said, but I'm not skeptical of the end result. There is so much circumstantial evidence, it is not hard to jump to the conclusions. Joshua Trevino, Chief Transformation Officer at the right-leaning Texas Public Policy Foundation in Austin, told me. Conservatives note that progressives have long opposed efforts to stymie the influx of illegal immigrants, starting with Democratic sanctuary city mayors' refusal to cooperate with U.S. immigration and customs enforcement officials when Trump was president. Then there's Joe Biden's reversal of Trump's decision to bar illegal immigrants from the 2020 census and the dramatic uptick in the number of illegal immigrants entering the United States under Biden, from a little more than 400,000 in 2020 to more than 2 million in 2021. In recent years, they say signs that progressives are packing the vote have mounted. They include Democrats enabling undocumented immigrants to vote in local elections, blurring the distinction between citizen and non-citizen. In California in 2023, a court of appeal ruled in favor of a 2016 San Francisco measure enabling non-citizens with children to vote in school board elections. In November, voters in once Republican Orange County in Southern California will vote on a measure permitting non-citizens to vote in local elections. New York City, Los Angeles, Portland, and other cities have tried, but so far failed to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. State governments such as Minnesota and Rhode Island, mostly controlled by progressives, are enabling undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses, which puts them closer to the ability to vote. This applies only to state and local elections, as a 1996 federal law prevents non-citizens from voting in national elections. While Washington state made it possible to obtain a driver's license without a social security number in 1993, and New Mexico followed suit in 2003, there has been a rise in non-citizen voting states more recently, with 19 states and Washington, D.C. now making it possible. Meanwhile, on October 1st, California went one step further, with Governor Gavin Newsom signing into law a measure barring cities from requiring identification to vote. It's unclear how many non-citizens have cast ballots in state or municipal elections. The number of non-citizens voting illegally is vanishingly low. The Biden administration is processing non-citizens' naturalization applications at the fastest rate in history. It's not unusual in the lead up to an election for more people to apply for citizenship and the right to vote, but the Biden administration has made a point of streamlining the process, hiring more staff at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and shortening the application from 20 pages to 14. In the first 9 months of 2024, it took 4.9 months to get an application process versus 11.5 months in 2021. All of these various ballot measures and bureaucratic maneuverings and political initiatives feed irrational conspiratorialism, said Trevino at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Trevino said Sister Norma Pimentel, executive director of the Rio Grande Valley branch of the progressive group Catholic Charities USA, has played a key role in moving immigrants across the border and resettling them in the United States. I've heard her described as a plaza boss, he said, a term for the cartel man in charge of an area. Among others, Pope Francis has praised Pimentel for helping immigrants fleeing from true social hells. Pimentel did not reply to a Free Press request for comment. It's not crazy, Trevino said, to start to ask questions like, what's the intent behind this? In recent months, Republicans have sought to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls in Georgia, Alabama, Nevada, Michigan, and Virginia, but Democrats have pushed back, accusing Republicans of trying to sow distrust in the electoral process. Earlier this month, the Department of Justice filed suit against Virginia on the grounds that it had violated the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 with its list maintenance efforts. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin responded that his state was simply trying to make sure that only citizens vote in Virginia. Erasing Charleroi, a short movie about the little town 30 minutes south of Pittsburgh that has recently absorbed several waves of Haitian immigrants, strikes an even darker tone. And Latrobe, where I was, is about an hour away from Pittsburgh, just for perspective. In the video, a local man accompanied by an ominous soundtrack describes vans mysteriously shuttling Haitian immigrants around town. The culprit appears to be a local food packaging company called 4th Street Foods, whose crime seems to be importing cheap labor. Nate Hochman, the right-wing filmmaker who produced Erasing Charleroi, insisted there was nothing veiled or surprising about progressives colluding with business to bring in more immigrants. They've been boasting about how immigration is going to create bulletproof majorities for a generation. That is how they see immigration, Hochman told me, referring to Democrats. He cited a 2019 piece by Los Angeles Times columnist George Skelton entitled "California's Changing Demographics Will Further Doom Republicans," and a 2018 piece from New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg called "We Can Replace Them" as evidence. But it stretched back much further than that, Hochman added. He pointed to the influential book, The Emerging Democratic Majority by John B. Judas and Roy Teixeira, published in 2002. The book argues that growing Latino and Asian communities would lead to a new Democratic era starting around 2008. And this is interesting because not Asian communities, but Latino communities there's big Latino communities who are backing Trump and who are Republican. Barack Obama's historic.
We talked about that for years. That makes sense.
No, I know, but that's why I'm saying that this argument that that growing Latino and Asian communities would lead to a new Democratic era doesn't make sense. Barack Obama's historic victory that year seemed like a powerful vindication of this thesis. But when I asked Teixeira himself about Republican fears that Democrats are trying to rig elections via immigration policies, he said, "I think it's basically bullshit." Teixeira, a political scientist who formerly worked at progressive think tanks and is now a fellow at the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., noted that we made no claim in the book that this was part of a deliberate plan on the part of Democrats to juice their electorate. More recently, Judas and Teixeira have argued that Democrats have lost the plot, succumbing to the influence of Wall Street and progressives' cultural radicalism, which will only cost them votes. Nor do the new arrivals appear to be adhering to the nightmarish playbook outlined by Trump and Musk. After they arrive in the United States, most immigrants head to Texas, Florida, New York, or California. Ammon Blair, a senior fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, told me 2 red states, 2 blue, and none that are especially competitive in our national elections. And also places that are, besides New York, places that are warm. If you're coming from a warm climate, you're most likely going to want to live in a warm climate. I would think that's also a big deciding factor. And there is no consensus on how these recently naturalized citizens vote. if you look at the trend in terms of Democratic support, particularly among Hispanics, it's not favorable to the idea that if you simply bring in more of these people, they're going to vote for Democrats the way they did in 2012, Texiera told me. He said Hispanics are moving, as we just talked about, from a 2-to-1 preference for the Democrats to a more even split of 55 to 45. But Trevino at the Texas Public Policy Foundation says this is all missing a deeper point. What this entire conversation is about is whether the people of a nation have a right to define who their neighbors and fellow citizens are, he said. Even if you could establish with ironclad empiricism that admitting several million folks from overseas would result in conservative policies forever, I don't think that would be enough to persuade those of us on the conservative side. What the America First crowd doesn't understand, Texiera said, is that the effects of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which enabled large numbers of Latin American and Asian immigrants, among others, to come to the U.S., are complex. All of the Biden administration's policies on this issue, including limiting deportations, just reflects a very liberal attitude toward immigration. This attitude and all the policies that spring from it, Texiera said, have a lot of unintended consequences. He added, it's all fucked up, to use a technical term. Those unintended consequences are felt everywhere in Lockland, said Mayor Mark Mason, who calls himself an independent. He described how Mauritanians are dialing 911 not to report an emergency, but to get a ride to the doctor. Well, I mean, I guess if you need to go to the doctor and you can't get to it, that is an emergency, but you probably should just call an Uber. He told me about the loiterers on the sidewalks, the new kids crowding into classrooms, and the cultural chasms, the resentment and anger between townspeople and their new neighbors. We do have issues with how they treat females because they're Muslim, Mason said of the Mauritanians. They believe that females are beneath them. And honestly, I know that's hard for liberals to digest a little bit. It's because it feels hateful, but you see that even in New York, and it's not Muslim specific. New York City is very diverse, and there are a number of cultures and religions that treat women like shit, and it is apparent when you interact with these people in New York City. Everyone knows it, and it's widely talked about. There's no effort on their part to learn our culture, let alone our language. A female town official, and I mean, I think treating women with dignity is not, that's not learning culture. Okay. A female town official was forced to call the police after several Mauritanians harassed her on the street. Wymeyer, the fire chief, confirmed. But also, I don't think this is a bunch of people attacking women. It's different. Zeke Hernandez, a Wharton Business Administration professor who has studied the impact of immigration on labor markets, called these disruptions part of the congestion that comes with growth. And also, I'm going to also clip onto what I just said. Plenty of American men treat women like shit too. So that's part of our culture, just the same. Not all that dissimilar to the chaos that engulfed New York's Lower East Side at the turn of the last century. Responding to fears stoked by Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, that foreigners are taking jobs from Americans, Hernandez said, "You want an economy that is creating jobs for everybody. You don't want a zero-sum game. I share that sentiment, but the way you harm Native workers the most is by keeping immigrants out." A growing chorus of right-of-center organizations, the National Immigration Forum, the Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force, Women of Welcome, and others, is pushing back against the MAGA rights theories on how their political opponents are using immigration as a new form of gerrymandering. This includes evangelicals, business leaders, and old-fashioned Republicans whose views are closer to those of Ronald Reagan. Tom Thompson, a U.S. Air Force veteran and the chief of the Sinclair College Police Department in Dayton, a half hour from Lockland, is part of that constellation of voices. Thompson voted for Trump back in 2016, but was turned off by the anger. In 2020, he backed Biden. This year, Harris. My favorite president of all time is George W. Bush. Wow, that's I don't know if I've ever heard someone say that. Wow, I'm stunned. I really like his demeanor. He told
Not
me.
even his mom would say that.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to say. Wow. Okay. Over the past several years, Thompson said Dayton and its surrounding Montgomery County had absorbed 30,000 immigrants from China, Afghanistan, Turkey, sub-Saharan Africa, and Mexico. They had come on student visas, and some of them were undocumented, he said. On balance, he welcomed the newcomers. It's good for us, Thompson said. We'll see more blended families. He noted that he and his wife had adopted their oldest son as a teenager from Central African Republic. His son went on to play professional basketball, mostly in Europe, and is now in his 40s and living in San Antonio. Were it not for immigrants, Thompson added, Montgomery County, like so many hollowed-out post-industrial counties across the middle of America, would hemorrhage people and money. The newcomers, he said, had brought new foods, new languages, new blood, and new ideas for businesses that had yet to be created. He was not surprised that so many immigrants wound up in Ohio or Pennsylvania or elsewhere in the Midwest. Typically, it's because the cost of living is so much lower and the opportunity to have jobs at factories and jobs where you don't need to be proficient in English is higher or have a college education, right? Meanwhile, he was feeling discouraged by all the politicians, the unsubstantiated rumors about people eating other people's pets in Springfield, the absolutely hateful, disgusting rhetoric. Thompson feared that the emotions unleashed by the immigration debate will be hard to contain. I think people are just revved up, he told me. He meant on the campaign trail, online, on social media. There's going to be a lot of anger and hate, and I don't know that we can do anything about it. It's going to be a big ball of yuck. All right, so I want to concentrate on that. And then just real quick to briefly talk about this thing that I saw and I didn't look into because I think it was happening when I was still on the road maybe. There was ballot drop box fires in a couple of places in Oregon and Washington, and this destroyed hundreds of ballots. And because of the locations, I was assuming that it was trying to destroy Democratic ballots, but federal authorities, this is from CNN, federal authorities are investigating fires at 2 ballot boxes reported Monday morning in the Portland, Oregon area that destroyed hundreds of ballots at one location. Or it could just be like a citizen who's mad, as well as another fire reported earlier this month. Evidence from the incendiary devices found at the ballot boxes Monday show the fires are connected, as well as it's the Zodiac killer, as well as a third incident reported in Vancouver, Washington on October 8th. Portland police also identified a suspect vehicle seen leaving the fire in Portland. So it's like one dude and they're unsure of the motives. But again, it feels like, so like let's look up. So Portland, Oregon, we know is obviously Democratic, but Vancouver, Washington, liberal or conservative. Let's see. Actually, this leans more Republican, so that goes against my theory. All right, so maybe it's just a fucking crazy dude. All right, but there was an investigation going on, so I just wanted to bring that up because, again, there's going to be, depending on who wins, there's going to be talk about fraudulent ballots and tampering, etc. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Again, for joining me for this last episode of Without a Country before we cast all our ballots for the next president of the United States of America. I hope that you will vote. I hope that you will share this episode with friends, with family, and I hope that you are critically thinking and also learning to engage peacefully with people that you disagree with. A reminder, New York City, election night, Tuesday, November 5th. Please come to my election night stand-up show and results watch-along. Star-studded, going to be so much fun. Again, stand-up by me, Christina Hutchinson, Ryan Long, Danny Polishchuk, Lev Fur, and AJ Giro, and 1 Minute by Mike Harrington. It is going to be so much fun. I'm so looking forward to it. And of course, for all of you who just want to watch the podcasting part, the live results watch along will be happening on YouTube starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. And then we'll do our regular live stream again Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And also, please make sure to check out on YouTube, The Daily Show presents Jordan Klepper Fingers the Pulse Rally Together, which is features Christina Hutchinson and myself prominently as we went to a Trump rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and shared that clip on my Instagram because of them taking it down because of the spelling of misogyny. And just remember, the I comes before the Y in misogyny. Again, thank you so much to everyone who is participating in the show, who emails me. We'll find Shelley Miscavige yet. If I was Kamala Harris, that's what I would be promising the great people of America. Follow me on social media at Philanthropy Gal. Follow Mike at Them Harrington. If you want to email us, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. God bless you. Good night.